Words are very made up.
Yeah, they are.
Chemistry's kind of made up. Numbers made up, but worthful. Worthful?
Worthful.
Worths.
This is the Mud Peddlers, a podcast where two nerdy ceramic artists share the behind the scenes of their worlds of clay. We are your hosts, Lindsey M Dillon.
And I am Donte of Earth Nation.
So, this week on the Mud Peddlers, we are talking about glaze chemistry and replacing materials, basically. And we are actually doing this topic because of a dear listener who reached out and asked a question. And so we want to thank Sal Navarez of Sal Navarez _art.
They're busting right now. They're like,
Woo! That's me! Yeah! Thank you for sending in this question. So I'm going to read the message that they sent to Donte. So Sal said, "Hey Donte, I'm hearing Take two. Hey Donte, I'm hearing through the grapevine about ceramic glaze materials that are becoming extinct or getting on the quote-unquote endangered ingredients list.
yup.
But how do you stay in the know about these materials? With the way things are going in today's world, especially within the US, I feel the need to be more mindful about my ceramics resources." Aw. "Also, I love the Mud Peddlers podcast you do with Lindsey. Maybe this could be an episode topic." Yes, it is.
You know what? Matter of fact, yeah, it could.
It's happening, right?
It's happening right
meow. Right meow.
Right meow.
Right meow.
Right meow. Shout out to
right.
Tim C, who makes me say right meow.
Yeah.
Doesn't make me. He does it.
No, it's he makes you.
If I don't do it, I'm actually punished by him.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
He comes in the middle of the night and unplugs my kiln.
Yeah, it's very upsetting. I like the idea of Tim C canonically being a little like ceramic goblin. So
You didn't say meow. Yeah. I don't know why he's a 90s gangster.
I don't even know, man.
I wasn't born.
Anyway,
back then. I don't know.
Anyway, so all right. So I realized when we were prepping for this episode, we didn't actually talk about the first part of the question, which is how the heck do you even stay abreast of like what things are going out and what things aren't? So I have some thoughts about this, and I will say these thoughts, and then I would love to hear what you think about my thoughts, and then I would like to get your thoughts. That's usually how podcasts work, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Well,
okay.
Well, I do want to say at a base for anyone who doesn't know, so both clay and glazes are made of minerals that are combined in a recipe or certain ratios. Mm-hmm. So when Sal's asking about like minerals that are going extinct, they're talking about either companies or potters in their homes making glazes and being like, oh, hey, I need this one mineral to make this glaze, but it's either not available to us anymore or it's more difficult to get.
Yeah.
That's what they're talking about. So I think a lot of people just kind of buy bottle glazes, they buy clay without wondering about the infrastructure of like how that's actually done.
Yeah.
They're all technically recipes that use minerals to create them. Like glazes are just minerals floating in water, realistically speaking. Mm-hmm. And when one of those minerals either dies or becomes endangered or more expensive or extinct.
Yeah, in the sense of like oftentimes what will happen is, and I was reading an article about this, I think it was on the Ceramic Arts Network, I can't remember, but there was an article essentially saying that like oftentimes what will happen is that like sometimes the mine will literally run out of materials.
Yes.
But also what will happen is that essentially ceramic artists are not a strong enough demand on the market that if mining those certain materials reaches a certain expense point for the mining company, they'll just stop mining them.
Yes.
And so it's not like those things are just gone, it's just that the company isn't mining them anymore, so it's harder for ceramic artists to get them.
And we're also, you have to remember, I don't think people think about this, we're not a primary industry. We're not.
Yeah.
We use red iron oxide in our glazes, but red iron oxide is also used in like food and medical equipment and makeup and like CMC gum. CMC gum we can use in our glazes, yes, but it's also used in a lot of food.
I did not know that.
Look
that is
it up.
So crazy to me.
It's
okay.
weird.
I feel like we should maybe if you can remember, send me receipts in so they can post things in the because I don't want to be. I believe you, but I also don't want to be just like spouting
just
information.
Listen, if you hear this right now, just Google what is red iron oxide used in.
Or CMC. CMC gum is the main one I'm curious about.
CMC gum, I think, last time I looked, is technically natural. And when I say natural, it comes from a plant.
Yeah, I mean, but so does like...
It's a thickener. And so it's used in food to thicken things. Because I'm pretty sure it's food safe. But just, honestly, if you Googled it, it'd be the first shit you see.
Okay, yeah, that would be... Yeah, I would Yeah. Look it up. I'd double check. But point being, yes, the materials that we use in ceramics are used in other things.
They're
like
used majoritively in other things.
Yeah. We're the secondary industry, as you said.
Not even secondary.
Okay.
We're not even secondary.
We're down on the list, but you know what? We're here, and we're very excited to be doing what we're doing. And so, my thoughts on how the main way that you can stay abreast of like what materials are potentially going out or that are potentially going to be harder to access, my first thought is you just ask your materials supplier.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
yes.
Yeah. So I again, like if you're in the Sacramento area, there's a few different resources. I'm a huge fan of Alpha Fired Arts. They're where I get most of my materials. And then of course there's also IMCO, the Industrial Minerals Company. So if you ask the folks there, because they're the ones responsible for ordering the materials, they're probably going to be the first point of contact that you could ask, unless you were going to like find out who the mining companies are and like somehow contact them.
Yeah, you can do that too, Absolutely.
Yeah. Have you ever done that?
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Who did you contact?
The Simbar company.
Oh.
I don't know if Simbar is the company. I'm pretty sure it is, actually, yeah.
But it's the folks who basically created the replacement for
talc.
Or
Amtalc.
Amtalc, because there's Amtalc, and then now basically what we have access to is no longer Amtalc, but Simbar talc.
Right.
And so you talked to Simbar?
Well, I called them on the phone, so I don't know if I talked to Simbar himself.
Oh yeah, no. The company. You contacted the company.
I don't know if Simbar the pirate answered the phone.
But you have heard of me.
But you have heard of me. So what usually happens for like the string that I go through to see materials is that I'll listen to the community, and then they'll often tell you like, hey, Gerstly borate, especially in the US, is kind of going out of style. The reasons for that are almost never known unless you have an in the company. Yeah. Unless you really know. Like, some people are like, oh, the mine dried up, or there was a environmental hazard or something. Or, like, another company bought it all because they figured that buying it all for their product is more valuable than giving it in a mineral form to potters and selling it to potters. And so it's safe for another company. There's a bunch of reasons. Sometimes it's just, like, delivery systems or, like, the delivery structures.
We all experienced that during COVID, where it was like, oh man, it's gonna take like 6 months for me to get my, I don't know, methylene cyanide or whatever.
Right. You know? Or like the plaster mix you waited forever for.
Oh my god, so long.
Yeah. You waited. I was like a year, no?
Something like that. No, I don't think it was quite that long. I think it took me a while to order it. I don't remember exactly what.
But I don't think it's from here though. It's like #1 pottery plaster is like from China.
Maybe, yeah, I don't know. I don't know where it's from.
I'm not sure. I have to look that up.
Yeah, I just buy like the pottery plaster that is like the most common brand that I've ever seen.
Right.
And I just ordered it through Alpha, but
right. So to answer your question, Sal, what you really got to do is you have to like keep abreast of it, right? You have to make sure. What I personally do is I go to IMCO because they're a mineral company, and they order the minerals directly, and their workers put together glazes and clay, and they make it there on site, and they sell it on site. So their workers, the manager, I'll say his name, but he's a great dude. And anytime I talk to him about anything mineral wise or chemistry wise for minerals, he's like, oh yeah, I have to know about these things because I sell them. So he's a mineral company that not only sells clay and glazes, he also sells it to other people who need it for their stuff. So the things they're using outside of the pottery world, he's selling it to them too.
Oh, cool. Okay, so he's like selling to that company is IMCO is selling to like the primary and secondary and tertiary and quaternary.
Yeah. I like all the naries.
Oh, yes. I don't know what happens when you get to 5. But anyway, so they're selling to
octo-ary. I skipped a couple numbers.
Octonary. Anyway.
But they're a mineral company. They're not a pottery company that sells minerals. They're a mineral company that happens to do pottery on the side. Yeah. And that's really the difference, right? So when I talk to him like, hey, how's Simbar talc going? He's like, yeah, we're using Simbar talc. It seems to be an okay 1-to-1 ratio. It's working in our stuff. It's good. And I'm like, cool. And then I test it in my house, and then I kind of go through the things. But you really gotta talk to someone on the ground level. Alpha I like, but Alpha usually has to go to the computer and look it up. IMCO's like, yeah, we touch it on a daily basis. So,
yeah. Well, because like you said, like Alpha Fired Ceramics is a ceramics company. Like they sell to potters, or they sell to ceramic artists, and like that's their thing. But like you said, I didn't know that IMCO actually sells to other non-ceramics industry things, and that's really cool. And I think
IMCO's not just for potters.
The other thing I would also maybe encourage folks to do is that like because obviously you have a lot of context around these different chemicals and these different like materials that are being used. But I'm pretty sure you can also just go in and be like, hey, you know, I'm like, if you're completely new to like glaze making, you can be like, hey, like I'm new to glaze making. Are there any materials that I should be aware of that the supply might be at risk? You know, I think it's okay to just go in and ask that too.
You can definitely ask. What I often do is I kind of hear whispers and then I check it out. Like, I'll go to the mineral company and be like, is that true? And half the time he's like, no.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and see,
I don't know what you're reading on Facebook, but nope. Like,
okay, that's good to know, because I think that's one of the things that like it sounds like Saul was addressing in their message to you, is that like, yeah, you kind of hear whisperings, but like, how do you know what's legit?
Well, there's also like minerals that are important and there's minerals that not. Like any feldspar, I can work with. Feldspar is like such a common family of minerals that like, oh no, we ran out of G200 EU feldspar. Okay, use G200. Oh no, we ran out of G200. Use the UK version. Oh no, the UK version. It's okay. We have 4 different versions.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
So after asking the distributor, after asking the person who distributes it to you, you can also technically ask them for the chemical analysis sheet on those things if you want, if you're looking for that kind of thing.
Okay.
So almost every mineral company or whoever supplies the minerals has to give you a chemical analysis of what's inside of the minerals. And because of that, you have access to that for public information. Whether the distributor, like IMCO, will give it to you, or you look it up online, or sometimes I get frustrated, like I did with red iron oxide, and I'll just call the company.
Yeah.
And be like, what's the purity of your red iron oxide? Because the word high purity is really ambiguous when I'm looking for over 90%.
Yeah.
Like, what's high to you on a paper? 80%? Is that a good grade to you?
Yeah.
Not to me.
and the reason why that would be important is because, like we're going to get into a little bit later in the episode, is that when you have something like okay, well, like with the red iron oxide, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's basically just red iron oxide.
Yes.
Like, in terms of what is on that chemical analysis sheet.
It's
because it's just red iron oxide.
Yes.
But if you have something like a feldspar, that's gonna have
multiple elements on the periodic table that compose that mineral.
Yeah.
Multiple things.
Yeah.
Like
you could
spodumene is, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Like, I since baking comparisons are always the way that I go for this. It's just kind of like red iron oxide is like the flour, but like feldspar would be like a cupcake in terms of it's made of a bunch of different things.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah.
You can't eat okay, this metaphor is slightly falling apart in the sense that, like...
It just started, though. I just want to say that.
A feldspar on its own is not enough to make a full-blown glaze.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, no, here's a better example.
I'm with you,
Okay, all right. So, if a glaze is a chocolate chip cookie, right?
Okay.
Like, an iron oxide would be like the flour. Like, it's just the ground up wheat, it's just the one thing. But a feldspar would be like a chocolate chip, because the chocolate chip is not one thing. It's composed of like cocoa beans and usually some sort of fat and something else to make it like chocolate, right? So chocolate, like, cocoa powder is...
flour is like wheat at its base. And the chocolate is technically multiple things.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess.
But you put all of it together to make the chocolate chip cookie.
Yes.
Yes. So, given that things cannot be... Or I guess the main reason that we wanted to talk about this is because most of the time, you can't replace one material for the other in a 1-to-1 ratio.
Well, the main reason I mentioned the mineral companies and contacting them for the chemical analysis, or talking to the mineral companies, or even the person who supplies it, let's take Simbar, for example. You can, like you said, you can just kind of ask them, like, are there any minerals that are on the endangered list? And they'll, like, Amtalc was definitely on the endangered list for a long time. I just moved to Simbar talc. But, like, nobody will call you and tell you that. You got to do the legwork.
Yeah.
You know what? And so I'm just telling you that because, like, don't go on Facebook and be like, what are some endangered? Because then people, old heads like me, are just going to give you a list of stuff you can't have anymore, like Kona feldspar and Custer feldspar. But you want to know that stuff now. Like, you want to know what's endangered now.
Yeah.
So you can get ahead of it.
Especially if you're in the process of, like, beginning to make a bunch of glazes, or you're, like, choosing what... Like for me, one of the things that I did when I started making my own glazes is I had a list of like 5 or 6 glazes that I knew I was going to use.
Yes.
But if one of those glazes, like let's say I had made a clear glaze, or let's say I was using a recipe for a clear glaze.
Right.
if one of those materials in that glaze was like gonna immediately go out of stock, I would want to choose a different clear.
Right.
Because like I don't want to have to be changing things as constantly. But so since we know that we can contact the mineral companies, we can contact sometimes our local like ceramic supply stores.
Right.
The thing that is complicated that like we can't fully explain here because like, okay, so when we were prepping for this episode, we were essentially talking about like, okay, so we know that materials go out of stock, but what do we do about it? And the thing is that there are some materials that you can replace one-to-one. For instance, Amtalc can be replaced basically one-to-one with Cymbar talc.
Yeah, relatively, yeah.
Yeah. But there's also, like, we have also ran into situations where people will say, you know, someone on Facebook will say, oh, yeah, you can replace, you know, this material with this material.
And a 1-for-1, and
it's
no.
And it's not.
No,
right.
most of the time it's a no.
Yeah.
It's stop. No.
Yeah.
No! No!
So, the thing that is difficult about this whole situation is that there's a part of me that wants to be like, how do we teach people how to replace one material for another when one of those materials goes out of stock?
Ooh,
but the problem with that is that it requires...
More than a podcast, bro.
More than a podcast.
More than a podcast to explain that to you, yeah, for sure.
And there's not really an easy answer. So what I think we're going to be able to address on this podcast is like a general structure for how you can begin the investigation of how to replace one material for the next. But know that if you're completely new to glaze making, there's going to be some information that might be that might go over your head a little bit. But come back to this episode when you have more experience, because we will basically, what we're going to try and go over is like, okay, this one material's gone out. How can we begin to understand why something cannot be replaced one for one, and how to begin researching it so that you can maybe find the right way to change the glaze recipe so that you can still get basically the same results as you did before and still replace the material, the ingredient that is no longer in stock.
If I were to answer the initial question and go along with what Lindsey said simultaneously, what I would say is if you're wondering what minerals are on the endangered list, or if you want to talk to the actual company, because I feel like a lot of people think like, oh, we'll just never talk to them, you know? Mm-hmm. Go to the store that sells you the minerals that you're using to make your clay and your glazes, and just simply ask them, where do you get your minerals from? They'll generally, if they're not the company themselves, like IMCO, because we just have the direct company, they'll tell you where they get it from. You can usually call that company, and they'll tell you where they get it from. And then you can look up the chemical analysis online, because they must give you a chemical analysis of the minerals.
So let's talk about what that chemical analysis is.
Yes.
Sorry.
So you can have direct contact, but don't like just start calling companies, if you catch my drift. Like, Alpha does not make minerals. Mm-hmm. I would have to go to Alpha and be like, where do you get your minerals from? Oh. And then call that person.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
That's the answer to Sal's question is, how do you keep abreast of that stuff? If you want to talk to the actual company, the store probably doesn't know, but the store who gets their materials from a place, that place probably knows. As far as the chemical analysis goes, right, every mineral is broken down into a different set of elements. So Lindsey's right, you can't just replace things one-to-one. Most minerals aren't just like the same exact amount of elements in a mineral. And I think people think of minerals as ingredients as the end-all be-all of the ingredient. Mm-hmm. Like you were saying, flour. Yeah. People think of flour as like just flour. But realistically, on the periodic table, flour is made of a bunch of those little elements.
Right. Well, I think if we're going with the cooking analysis, we're talking about chocolate chips.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Like chocolate chips are
a good one.
Are the things that are made up of a bunch of different things.
Yes. So you
flour is like flour is like lithium. Flour is like red iron oxide.
No, you're right. So like if you're like, oh, chocolate chips are just chocolate chips. No, chocolate chips are made of a certain amount of like cocoa and then sugar, and then the milk chocolate has a certain amount of milk in it. Mm-hmm. Right? And those are like the elements, okay? You can't just replace certain chocolate chips for another version of chocolate chips and then be like, they don't taste exactly how I want them to. Well, you didn't follow the recipe.
Yeah.
Now you have a different ratio of X and Y in that chocolate chip.
Yeah. It would be like if you've been baking with milk chocolate chips, you can't necessarily replace the milk chocolate chips with dark chocolate chips and expect your cookie to taste the same. Because it's, even though it's similar, it's not exactly the same. And there are also situations where, if we want to stretch this even more, someone could say, oh yeah, beets, you can chop them up into small shapes. Those, you replace those with chocolate chips. It's like, no.
You can use beet sugar instead of cane sugar, and you're like, I guess. They're both still sugar, but they're definitely... Your recipe... The problem is people are really picky with their glazes. So it's like, oh, it'll come out the same blue. No, it won't. Mm-hmm. You're using different things. So, like, let's take this example like we were talking in the coffee shop, right? So, lithium carbonate is just lithium and carbon. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people online who'll be like, oh, you can just replace it for spodumene. No.
Wait, like, replace lithium with spodumene?
You can replace... Yeah, so if your recipe has lithium in it, mm-hmm. and you're like, I don't want to use lithium, or I don't have lithium, and some dingus online goes, oh, just replace it in a 1-for-1 ratio with spodumene.
Yeah.
That's not how it works.
Okay, tell me why.
Lithium is lithium, and it comes with carbon. It's lithium carbonate. That's all it comes with. Mm-hmm. When you look it up on Digital Fire, that's all it is. That's its chemical analysis. If you go to digitalfire.com and put in lithium carbonate, right? Mm-hmm. It'll tell you, and I'm going to look it up right now just to be highly accurate.
And while Dante's looking that up, we'll explain a little bit. So with Digital Fire, my understanding is that essentially, like we had talked about earlier, you can go to the companies that are mining these materials and say, hey, what's the chemical analysis of this particular mineral? Tony Hansen is the general?
Tony Hansen owns Digital Fire, and he does a really good job at putting the chemical analysis of minerals on Digital Fire.
Because basically what he did is he went to those companies and said, hey, can I have the digital analysis? Those companies gave it to Tony Hansen, the creator of Digital Fire, and then Hansen put it onto the Digital Fire website.
Right, which is his reference library, right? So we look at lithium carbonate. It's 40.74% lithium, and then it's 59.26% carbon dioxide.
Right.
Okay. You cannot replace that with spodumene, even though a lot of people say you can, which is crazy to me.
So tell us what's in spodumene.
I'm going to tell you what's in spodumene.
Tell me.
I'm going to tell you what's in spod right now.
Tell me what's in the spod, bruh.
So I think where people get confused is because spodumene does indeed have lithium in it. The problem is it comes with alumina and quite a bit of silica. Mm-hmm. So if you're looking for a 1-to-1 replacement, and you do replace it 1-to-1, you've just introduced quite a bit of alumina and silica to your recipe that wasn't in the immediate recipe to begin with.
For shits and giggles, why don't you go down the whole list and say what is in spodumene?
Okay, so I'm not going to use the dioxide words. I'm just going to say lithium and alumina and silica. Okay. Because some people get nitpicky. I see you out there. So it's 8.01% lithium. It is 27.41% alumina. And it's 64.59% silica. Those things were not in lithium. You cannot replace them in a 1-for-1 ratio. Mm-hmm. It's not how it works. You have to look at the chemical analysis. You have to know what is inside of your minerals, because that's what's reacting in your kiln. It doesn't... Yeah. There are some things you can. Like Minspar 200. If you look up Minspar 200 and Kona Feldspar, because Kona 4 Feldspar went dead a long time ago. I don't know what happened, but it's gone. Those are close enough in chemistry so that you can replace them in a 1-for-1 ratio, but that we just got really lucky. Yeah. Realistically speaking. Like, Custer Feldspar is one of those ones as well. I don't have a lot of Custer Feldspar left, but Feldspars are pretty ambiguous to me. You can kind of replace any Feldspar and make sure you kind of ratio it out correctly if you know how, right? But like...
That's the thing that makes it really tricky, because, for instance, like, let's say for some reason you were dead set on using spodumene as a replacement for lithium. Ooh. What you would have to do is you would look at spodumene and you would see, okay, this has lithium in it, yes, but like you said, it also has, what did you say, silica and alumina.
It's I think it's a feldspar or a feldspathoid. Okay. Which is anyway.
So what you would need to do is then look at the rest of your glaze formula, and you would look at the amount of alumina and silica that are in those parts of the broader glaze recipe, and essentially take out the silica and alumina.
That's what I do.
So basically to account for the excess alumina and silica that shows up in spodumene.
Yes, but the glaze calculators that we use always put how much silica, alumina, lithium, and all the other elements, they put them in this thing called the UMF, which is just the molar amount of how much of an element is there, but it puts them in a ratio. So if you add one more mineral than another, even if you have just more of one mineral or more of one element than another, it brings down the other by comparison because they're in ratio. So
What do you mean?
So like you have a glaze. It's glazes water and minerals.
Yes.
By adding more water, you've technically decreased the ratio of minerals to water.
Okay.
You didn't just add water. You've technically made your minerals weaker.
Oh, okay.
By comparison.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right? And so, like, a lot of the times when I'm like, I don't want to use lithium, I'll use 644, or I'll use, like, spodumene instead. I can't just be like, oh, it's 60 whatever percent silica. I'll just take out a bunch of silica. Right? That's like half of the equation. You have to make sure the ratios are correct. You have to make sure the recipe is well balanced with the amount of silica and alumina and whatnot.
Okay, so let's say...
It's not as simple as, like, take out, put in.
Yeah, okay, so essentially, if I'm to sort of summarize, because, dear listener, I'm learning along with you. So, essentially, let's say spodumene. I'm just going to use this as an example.
Spodumene's good because it has lithium in it, too, so it's a good example.
Okay, so let's say spodumene introduces 5 extra units of aluminum, right?
Okay, yeah.
So then let's say the glaze recipe that you're using has a total of 20 units of alumina.
Sure, we can use this, yeah.
You would not necessarily just be able to go, okay, in the main glaze recipe, instead of using 20 units of alumina, I'm going to use 15 units of alumina, and the 5 extra units of alumina that come in the spodumene are going to balance that out. Is that...
Yeah, it's not that simple, but that's usually people's first. Like, when I first started using the UMF, I would be like, okay, so there's a lot of silica in this glaze that I don't need, so I'll take out the silica. But there's some, like Fritz, and there's some feldspars that come with silica already. So taking out some of those things also takes out other things. Because some feldspars, so it's not like...
So it'd be like, okay, so this alumina, these 20 units of alumina over here, sure, it's mostly alumina, but let's say it has, like...
other stuff.
Like a smaller amount of, like, gobbledygook.
And you might need gobbledygook.
You might need the gobbledygook.
Right.
So,
and you're throwing out the baby with the bathwater when you just replace 1-for-1 ratios because someone on Facebook told you to. Like, it's not that simple.
Okay, so then essentially if someone was trying to learn how to replace them, you've talked about a couple different tools. You talked about the glaze calculator.
Yeah.
And you talked about the UMF chart, and you mentioned the term molar amounts. Now, I think we have talked about some of these concepts on previous episodes.
Cool.
And I think a little bit on a couple episodes of the Mud Peddlers for patrons.
That's a little deep, but I will tell you guys.
We can make it a relatively brief. Why don't we, if we're
I'm always so afraid of making it brief because the nerds...
I know.
You know what I mean?
But what we're going to do
We had this conversation before.
Dear listener, we're going to try and simplify some things for folks who are trying to learn.
Yeah, I'm not going to go deep.
Don't come at us with like, well, technically, because... But, well, okay, that sounds a little aggressive. Well, I basically just...
Be aggressive, Lindsey!
Okay. No, essentially what I'm trying to say is that we're going to try and simplify some things because, to be honest, for me, like, hearing all these terms like UMF, like molar amount, like, it's confusing to me because these are not terms that I'm very familiar with. They're very familiar to someone like you who has that level of glaze chemistry knowledge. If you have that level of glaze chemistry knowledge, awesome. This podcast episode is probably not for you because you probably understand everything we're already saying.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is try and explain it for folks who are like me, learning this process. Like right now, if I wanted to replace one glaze ingredient for another, I wouldn't really know where to start, and I'd probably be like, Donte, help. So this episode, so essentially what I want to do now is go, okay, what are the steps for finding that replacement? Like, where does someone begin the research?
I'll tell you in less than 5 sentences, maybe 7. So, find a glaze calculator online.
Where does one find a glaze calculator?
You can go to Glazy, you can go to Digital Fire, you can go to the Ceramic Material Workshop website. Those are the main 3 ones.
Okay.
When you put your recipe in grams, it'll spit out this thing called the UMF, called the Unity Molecular Formula.
Okay.
And that is essentially, I wouldn't say all, but it's a good representation of the molar amount of elements that are inside of your glaze by ratio and comparison.
Okay, so essentially if you have this glaze recipe that like we've been kind of making up along the way that has like alumina
This chocolate chip.
and this chocolate chip. So if you have this thing that includes alumina and lithium and mystery element gobbledygook.
Gobbledygook.
You know. So essentially if you have a glaze recipe that has a bunch of different kinds of chocolate chips in them.
Just do a cookie.
Okay, we're doing a cookie?
That way you can see the ratio of like the ingredients used to flour.
Oh, you're right.
To cornstarch.
Yes. Okay. No, you're right.
You're concentrating on chocolate chips a lot.
Okay. No, you're right. You're right.
But a recipe is just a cookie, and it's made of different things, and those things aren't 100% one thing. They're different things. Like chocolate chips, it can be like sugar and milk and this and that.
Oh, and that's a good example because a chocolate chip has sugar in it, but you also put sugar in a cookie recipe.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay, I got you. Okay, so the UMF of a chocolate chip cookie will tell you the overall amounts and ratios of sugar and flour and fats like butter or oils, and it basically looks at all the ingredients to come up with the total amount. So
yes, and it breaks down those elements.
Okay.
And it puts them basically on this thing called UMF.
Okay.
And the UMF just gives you how much, well, that's kind of an oversimplification, but a mole is just a group of molecules.
Okay.
Like a group of molecules would be like how many groups of sugar, I guess.
Oh, okay.
In that chocolate chip.
Okay.
Right? So it'll tell you like the molar amount of silica in comparison to the molar amount of alumina or like the rest of it. Right?
Okay.
You can do the math yourself, but it's complicated and almost no one I know does it past like the first 3 times.
Because that would involve like...
It sucks.
Yeah, okay.
It sucks. The Glaze calculator usually does it for you. Because the glaze calculators you have online kind of know, like, silica has this much element or, like, molecules of silica in it for this, right?
Okay.
And so when you plug in the whole recipe, it'll tell you the ratio of, like, hey, this is how much lithium. Hey, this is how much alumina in comparison to silica. Mm-hmm. This is how much magnesium you have in comparison to this other thing, right? And without getting into the weeds, usually if you plug a recipe in, and you plug another recipe in and you look at the difference, when you start replacing certain minerals and ingredients, you'll see the numbers change on the UMF. If you're like, I don't want to learn any of this shit at all, just tell me what to plug in the calculator. Plug a recipe into the calculator. Look at the UMF. Look at those numbers. Find an ingredient that makes the numbers the same as before you change the recipe around. You're done.
Okay, so...
You're done. And it does have the ability to pull up multiple recipes. So you can pull up, like, one recipe, look at the UMF on the bottom left-hand side, put in another recipe, and start put in the same recipe, but replace, like, one mineral, and you'll see the numbers change on the UMF.
Okay.
Your job is to make them the same.
Okay, so it's almost kind of like balancing an equation.
A little bit, but it does most of the math for you.
Okay.
Matt Katz did a really good job of being like teaching it to you the hard way, and then after that he's like, "So I have something to tell you. There's a calculator that does it for you." And I'm like, "Damn it!" But I thank him for it because now I understand it.
And remember, it's Rose Katz who's also involved in it.
Yeah, Matt and Rose. Matt's Rose. They have a team.
Yeah.
I only know Matt, Rose, and Kathy though.
Yeah. I just want to make sure because so often, again, it's the husbands who end up getting credit for things, and it's like, nope, Rose is part of it too.
I promise you, I'm not trying to be sexist. It's just that when you watch the video, like 90% of it is Matt talking to you.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
I didn't see Rose until like the very end of the class.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so let's say you got the UMF, you're in the process of trying to make the numbers the same on both.
Change it around to the numbers match.
Change it around to the numbers match.
Yep.
Generally speaking, I'm assuming that so we know that glazes are composed of 5, including water, broad categories of ingredients.
It's a glass former, it's a stabilizer, usually in the form of alumina, and then it's a flux. That flux is broken into metals and earths, alkali metal or alkali earth, and then there's water.
Right.
That's what makes a glaze.
Okay, so then let's say the ingredient that you're trying to replace is a stabilizer. Conceivably, what you would do then, let's say gobbledygook was a stabilizer.
Sure.
You would want to replace gobbledygook.
Gobbledygook is 100% alumina. Let's just say that.
Right. Okay.
Sure.
So.
And it comes with nothing else. In a make-believe world, it's 100% alumina dioxide or nitroxide, whatever.
Okay. So what you would do, broadly speaking, is you would want to find another stabilizer that is
near 100% alumina.
Right. Okay, so you wouldn't be, because again, there are so many different glaze materials out there.
Yes.
So you wouldn't, like, if the ingredient that's missing is a stabilizer, you would not want to try and replace it with something that's a flux.
Hell no.
Okay.
Unless you wanted that, I guess, but they're usually the minerals are in different families. Right. So like G200 feldspar is not the same as Guernsey borate, and Guernsey borate is not the same as alumina, and like they do different jobs.
Right. Okay, so you're replacing one type of ingredient for another type of ingredient, and all, like, in terms of, you would want to replace a stabilizer with another stabilizer, another
relatively
alkali earth flux with another alkali earth flux.
Yeah.
Broadly speaking.
Yeah, because they kind of do the same job. Like lithium does the same job as sodium, even though they're not the same element.
Are they the same type of category?
They're in the same, like, I'm going to dumb it down and say family. I don't mean to use the word dumb, but I'm going to razor it down and use the word family.
Okay.
So, like, the alkali earth metals, they kind of sort of do the same job.
As
alkali earth metals, what they do, as secondary flux.
Yeah. Okay. So, but essentially there's not any other kind of, like, you wouldn't replace a stabilizer with an alkali earth.
Usually no.
Okay. So then conceivably what you could do is you could Google
list of stabilizers. Yes.
And then go through those ingredients and kind of plug and play until you find something until you make the numbers match.
Yes. And just be careful though, because there's chemical reactions, but those come with experience. But, like, let's say we had a magical ingredient. Let's call it gobbledygook.
Okay.
That was 100% alumina, and alumina's a stabilizer.
Okay.
Let's just call it that instead of, just for any chemist listening right now who are like, actually, it's alumina trioxide. Shut up.
Sometimes I feel like you're inventing these people, but then sometimes I see some of the comments that people leave and I'm like, oh no, okay.
No, they exist.
People do come at you like that. I think most people don't, though. Most people don't. Most
people don't, and I'll make it short. As we had a conversation before, the difficulty is trying to bring this information to people that know nothing about it, but then there's people who know a lot about it and listen, and they go, technically you said that wrong, and I'm like, yeah, you're right, but, like, explaining it to someone who knows nothing about it is like a 3-hour class. Do you want that? And they're like, well, no, but you could have said it better. And I'm like, I could have, but I didn't, because you're a chemist and they're not.
Yeah, because we're trying to...
so shut up.
It's almost as though we create media for certain kinds of audiences and change our language to make things more accessible.
On top of that, Lindsey's on a ride-along right now, so...
What's that?
You're learning as well.
Oh, yes. No, absolutely. Which is, like, actually, it's super
You're on
helpful.
a ride-along right now, so but, okay, so, like, EPK, Edgar Plastic Kaolin, for me, has a lot of alumina in it. I treat it as a stabilizer. EPK comes with things that are not just alumina.
Right.
So I could not take our gobbledygook and replace it with EPK.
Right.
Because technically speaking, EPK might come with, like, a little bit of silica, which means I've added unnecessary, what we call floating silica to the recipe. Unneeded crap.
And silica is the glass former. So essentially, in trying to replace a stabilizer, you've introduced an extra of a different category, a different family.
Yeah.
Okay, let's say we're replacing gobbledygook with EPK. EPK adds extra silica. So now you may have fixed the issue within the stabilizer family.
Sure.
But now you need to fix the problem within the glass former family.
Yeah, and then you're probably going to go in and try and take out raw silica.
Right.
Like, because you're like, well, the silica already comes with EPK.
Yeah.
So I fixed the alumina problem, those numbers match, but now I have too much silica.
Right.
So, like, if you have 100%, if you have gobbledygook, it's 100% alumina, and you have EPK, let's just say it's 60%, whatever, you're going to be like, okay, so what if I need 600, the amount 600, right? So I'm going to add 100 times, 10 more times EPK than I would gobbledygook, because we're reaching 600. You've introduced whatever, you've multiplied the amount of silica by that much. You've introduced a lot of silica in amounts to your glaze.
Yeah.
So now you either had better ratio it, fix it, or figure out where to take it out somewhere else.
And by ratio it, what do you mean by ratio it?
Because, balance it.
But how would you balance it?
Take out silica.
Okay, so...
At this point, I would just take out silica.
Okay, so basically, you've got EPK replacing gobbledygook. And you end up with a bunch of floating silica, a bunch of extra silica.
Yes.
What you would do then is...
You don't want that.
You don't want that.
You don't want the extra the extra silica.
You don't want extra silica.
Yes.
Okay. Let's say the original recipe requires 200 units of silica.
Sure.
The original recipe. But when you replace gobbledygook with EPK, you end up with total units of 400 silica.
You have way more silica than you need, yes.
You have way more silica than you need.
Yes.
So you have to get back to the necessary 200 units of silica, you would essentially try and remove 200 units of silica that shows up in that recipe because the EPK is already providing all the silica that you need. So you essentially don't need to add extra silica to that recipe because all the glass forming silica that you need is being provided by the EPK.
Yeah, the amount of silica in the recipe is already enough.
Okay.
And so by introducing, and I'm going to look up EPK real quick because I'm pretty sure it comes with like alumina and silica.
Okay, yeah, no. I mean, we don't necessarily have, we could call it a separate false material, but yeah, no, because the EPK comes with, like you were saying, comes with a couple different things. But the issue then can come into what if your silica has other things in it?
Oh my god, EPK has so much stuff in it.
Okay,
anyway.
So many things. It's got like 10 different ingredients.
We have fictitious EPK that only comes with silica and alumina right now.
Yeah.
But long story short, to break it down to anybody, right? If you're trying to replace a mineral, the minerals that you might try to replace come with a bunch of other things that you might not need in the glaze. Mm-hmm. And it will mess up your glaze. So in order to replace it, you basically either have to get a glaze calculator and play around with the numbers and do the math yourself. Mm-hmm. The problem is, if we're using this fictitious thing, right, where we have to replace 100% alumina, and so we use something like EPK that only has 80% alumina, and 20% of that is let's just say silica. Mm-hmm. Now you have extra silica in your glaze that will mess up the efficacy of your glaze. Mm-hmm. So you have to play around with the numbers and figure out, okay, where can I take out silica in its most pure form? We're lucky that silica comes in silica.
Yeah.
Silica is mostly just silica.
Yeah.
That's not as easy as it is for most things, though.
Right.
That's really all you're doing.
Okay. So
you're just trying to make up for how much extra you've put in or taken out.
Okay.
And the glaze calculator gives you the molar amounts for what those things are.
Yeah.
Without getting into units and cookies. That's all you're doing.
Okay. And essentially how you would problem solve for that is, like you said, just getting the numbers to match.
Yeah.
So
without going through classes, you pull up a UMF, get the numbers to match, and then call it a day.
Okay. What is the margin of error? Because, for instance, you're having to keep in mind of, essentially what cone you want this glaze to be fired to, what color you want it to be, all these different things. So
there's chemical reactions, which are a whole different thing, too.
Yeah. Is there a general margin of error that's acceptable for certain materials?
That depends. That depends.
Okay.
That depends on you, really.
Okay, so essentially, the easiest thing to do is go to a glaze calculator, look at the UMF formula, play with the numbers to get the original recipe and the recipe with the replacement materials. You get those numbers to match.
That's the lazy man's way of doing it, yes.
That's not lazy. I'm going to say that in and of itself is hard.
Well, because honestly, you should be testing your stuff.
Yes. So then, if you can't, let's say hypothetically, you cannot get those two numbers to match exactly.
So sad.
Then it takes additional information to know what the acceptable margin of error is. So let's say you have a recipe that calls for 20 units of gobbledygook, but you've played with the numbers and you can only get 15.
Yeah.
Then you have to know and test whether 15 units of gobbledygook is still going to produce a usable glaze that is close enough to the original recipe.
Yes, if you're trying to get a 1-for-1 exact replica of the old recipe, then yes. I will say, though, if you just test your glazes after you mess around, and without understanding all the things, UMF is very powerful, very, very powerful. The problem is that sometimes it overpromises without knowing chemical reactions. So it's even if you got the numbers to match, you would still have to test it. Mm. And once you test it, you would have to use it over a prolonged period of time to see if it's good. Gillespie borate and Gersley borate are a perfect example. I don't know what's in Gillespie borate. Mm. I barely know what's in Gersley borate. But I know they're not a 1-for-1 ratio because I tested them and I get weird happenings on my Gillespie borate.
And the thing that's tricky about that too is that the company that produces Gillespie borate and Gersley borate,
sometimes they won't let
they don't give you the chemical analysis.
They don't let the chemical analysis go. So I've been doing other things, but it's on my naughty list for sure. Gillespie borate is on my it's not going to show up in most of my recipes for sure. Yeah, because I just don't trust it, and when I test it, it doesn't come out the same. Even though the numbers might match in accordance to the company's it's a 1-for-1. Even though the numbers might match on the UMF, I still have to test it.
Yeah.
There's no I want to say this now. There's no easy way to just be like, tell me what to replace it with. You have to do the legwork.
Yeah. So are there, because I think, like, I'm assuming on your channel on YouTube, you talk about, well, I guess maybe not, because I guess I'm wondering, like,
I don't have any videos on mineral replacement, if that's what you're going to
okay, yeah.
That's above my pay grade. I understand it myself, but I think if I talk to an actual chemist, they'd be like, 90% of what you said is correct, but the way 10% of what you said is contextually incorrect. But, like, I know for myself that I know how to use the UMF, and I know how to math it out. And at this point, I know enough chemical interactions to make things do what I want them to do and how to replace minerals. The problem is I've taken all the classes.
Yeah.
So I know how to do that.
So are you planning on, because, like, part of me thinks, like, okay, if I was so unlucky as to not know you and not have you be a friend and colleague,
yeah, I just do it for you,
like, my thought is, like, okay, if I didn't have you as a resource and I needed a replacement glaze, like, right now, what I'm wondering is, like, are you, or are there other ceramic artists that are providing, like, okay, even though you can't have a blanket statement across all these glazes, you can replace this one for one. For some of the more popular glazes out there, like, because, you know, there's like
floating blue.
Floating blue, yeah. Are there ceramic artists out there who are, for those more popular glazes, reformulating those glazes so that they can be used by new ceramic artists without those old materials? Is that being done anywhere?
Yeah, to a degree, but you really have to follow them. Like, I have a Glazy account, and I have glazes that I release publicly sometimes. Like, at least once a year, I'll release one of my private glazes to my patrons, and then, like, 3 times a year, I'll release a new recipe or so. But what happens is someone's like, I don't have... If you're in the States, you're like, I can't buy Gersley borate anywhere, especially if you're getting into it.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, well, you gotta learn how to replace it. And then they find Gersley borate, they find Gillespie borate on Facebook, and they're like, oh, I can just replace it 1-to-1, the company said.
Yeah.
And then they contact me like, yo, it didn't work, what the hell? And I'm like, I told you.
Yeah, I mean, but
my
that's,
stuff
like,
is pitting. I don't know what to tell you.
I mean, but that's...
I can reformulate it, but you gotta either learn yourself or... like, you have to do the footwork again. You have to do the footwork. There's no easy way around the work.
I almost... okay.
The UMF is actually... Once you understand the UMF, that is the easiest way to do it, and that still requires a bit of experience.
Yeah, and I think what I'm hearing from you is definitely, like, this information is hard. There's a part of me that... Well, I mean, I guess that's why there are glaze companies that sell...
It's hard, so they sell glazes.
Yeah, because there's a part of me that's like,
they have 5 nerds in the back like me doing this.
Yeah, I mean, because, like, honestly, if I knew how to, like, for the glazes that I have, since I have not developed any glazes at all the glazes that I use are glazes that were handed down to me from when I was a volunteer at Sac City College in their ceramics department. If I knew how to reformulate glazes, I would give those recipes out as a way to be like, yeah, not everybody is interested in that part of the legwork.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I mean, do you think that's okay though? Because, like, I guess I'm hearing some resistance of, like, you got to do the legwork.
No,
I'm not gonna.
I wouldn't say. So I used to think like that. I used to think, like, if I make a recipe, I'm just going to release it once I've kind of vetted it and put it through the ringer. But then people started to take, as you know, advantage of that and then call those recipes their own and steal my work.
Yeah.
And because they didn't want to do the legwork to learn to do it themselves, they would then take credit for my work. So unfortunately, because a couple of people shit in the ice cream, nobody can eat the ice cream and no one's going to eat around it. So I now have to lock away essentially the good glazes, and the more common glazes I release to the public. And my patrons, I don't mind reformulating stuff for them, because they pay and support me enough for me to do the work for them.
Right. Okay.
But me saying
that actually, I
it's just to protect myself. Really.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that.
But like, saying do the legwork isn't me being like, well, figure it out, kid.
Okay.
Just like I did. Like that's not the tone I'm going for.
Okay.
The tone
that's kind of what I was hearing a little bit, and I was like, this is interesting, Donte. I feel like this is not normally what you do.
I'm a very public community person, but I have learned that people will take advantage of my services. Yeah. And so because of that, I've had to protect it behind a wall. Also, slightly speaking, there really is no promise. Like if you give me a glaze and I go, this matches the exact UMF formula, there might be some interactions in that glaze with the minerals that do not account for the UMF. Yeah. Right? So like you still have to test it, and by me saying you have to test it, you still have to, again, do the legwork.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
There's no promises in ceramics, and you learn that the second you get into this art form. The second.
Yeah, so true, so true. Okay, all right. So essentially, if people are, you know, either not interested in or just kind of maybe don't have the time to like really, or aren't interested in putting in the time to really learn the glaze chemistry to be able to completely reformulate glazes by themselves, because as we've been over, it is complicated. Like the UMF definitely makes things easier.
Way easier.
Yeah. But it still takes a lot of knowledge to know how to tweak the numbers to get things close, and then ultimately you still have to test it. Yeah. So essentially what that means is that people can go to resources like you, and, you know, one of these days when you publish, I know it's going to happen when you publish a glaze book.
No, it won't be a glaze book for sure.
No, it won't be a glaze book?
No, that's a lie.
Oh, yeah, no, it's going to happen.
It might be a recipe book, but it's not. It's just going to be a recipe book straight out. It's not going to be like, here's how you do a thing.
Yeah.
People have that covered that are better than me.
Okay, all right, but they don't have your style. Anyway, point being, what I was going to say is that they will essentially, like, you have to recognize and pay for the skill that it takes to reformulate these glazes.
100%.
So you essentially either go, all right, I'm going to pay to have these glazes reformulated by a professional like you.
I'll do it for money. It's just you still have to test it on your side.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, of course. So you essentially either have to pay somebody else to do it in one way or another, or you have to learn all of the chemical shit for yourself.
Yes.
Okay.
You can buy your way out of the work,
Yeah.
but otherwise it'll still take some amount of like I'm not gonna say which company, but I've definitely had a company contact me and be like, help me reformulate this. Mm-hmm. I help them reformulate it, but they understand that like I'm gonna give you 3 or 4 recipes that'll probably work. Mm-hmm. And if you test them and you do a little line test, I think the last one I developed for a company took like 2 shots. Mm-hmm. I was like, this recipe will probably work, and they went, it's not like blue enough, and I was like, okay, well then here's a recipe, do a line test of like a rutile, and one of these and the line test will most likely work. And they're like, good, done, fantastic.
Okay.
The second line test, we got it.
Okay,
we reformulated an entire glaze in 2 tests.
So essentially, because like you could have like if you're replacing like a blue glaze, or let's say you're replacing a glaze.
Yeah.
You could have the numbers match on the UMF, but in a number of different ways.
Yes.
Like you could be replacing one material for another and another material for another, and like, but have 5 different ways of getting the same numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like, that's why it requires so much different testing.
Like titanium and iron will make, I think it's titanium, iron, and something else make the color blue. Mm-hmm. And lots of people are moving away from cobalt. So they're moving towards titanium, iron blues, which is fantastic. But rutile has iron and titanium in it already, which is why a lot of your floating blues have rutile in them.
Oh my god, I didn't know that.
Because rutile is not 100% one thing. It's multiple elements.
You telling me it's like a chocolate chip?
It's like a chocolate chip.
Oh my god.
It's got a certain ratio. So,
oh my god.
So when you put it in, it's like, well, I have to make this recipe, you know, from this blue. Like I took out all the cobalt, but now you have all this stuff you got to work with, right? And so you have to be able to figure out how much of what mineral is what element in order to replace things correctly. Yeah. The easiest way is the UMF, but I feel that's like giving a child a sword. It's like, this is really powerful, and if you don't use it correctly, you will hurt somebody. So please.
Careful.
And he's like, okay. Like the cat's gone.
Oh god.
You know what I mean? So it's like, and when I say lazy, I don't mean lazy as in like
negative.
I don't mean lazy as a negative. I mean in the way that you would probably want the fastest result for the least amount of work, because you just don't feel like doing the amount of work that requires a proper result, right? Definition wise, the UMF, just make the numbers match in the UMF and then test it. Right. That's probably the easiest way you can do it.
Well, to be honest, I actually feel like I have a much better understanding of how this all works now.
There was a kerfluffle in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, but like hopefully, like I feel like I definitely, like, because before you would talk about the UMF and you would talk about like ratioing things out, but I'm like, okay, no.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Tell me about like a step by step. What do you actually do? So I know that, like, I feel like now if you were like, fare thee well, Lindsey, I'm going to France.
That's how I talk.
And I'm going to never speak to you again. I would at least now have, well, I mean, after I like cried and like went to therapy for like, why?
I'm not going to France.
They
don't like me. They think I'm fat and rude.
Oh.
Is that true? I don't know. I've never been to France.
No, I mean...
I am fat and rude, that's not a French thing, actually. That's just true.
But point being, after all that, after I, went to therapy and cried about losing one of my... One of my best friends. No, but I'm saying if you, like, refuse to speak to me for some reason...
Oh.
I would now have, I feel like, a much better grasp on how I would replace... materials. I would still probably end up going to a professional other than you, and but I definitely feel like I have a better understanding of how to go about this. So, dear listener,
it's crazy because like I use the stole chart, and it'll tell you like where your glaze falls on like the mat and stuff.
Okay,
the stole chart is great.
Yeah, no.
Stop using it because it sucks. I hate the stole chart so much.
Okay, we're gonna save that for another episode.
It overpromises, I say.
Okay, all right. You got any kiln plugs? Kiln plug.
I will be doing I'm probably going to be releasing the glaze composition class sometime at the beginning of March.
Hell yeah. And if you're curious about more for that, we have a Patreon episode where we talked a bit about it.
You do not have to do all the things we just said, UMF and all that. It's if you want to know how to put a glaze together, period. Mm-hmm. That's it. How to read the recipe, put a glaze together, weigh the specific gravity, which I will explain, and make textiles to get you like your little starter pack of glazes. That'll be out probably at the beginning of March. I will be at NCECA 2025.
Yeah!
In March, at the end of March.
Yeah!
So if you want to go there and you want to say hi, please do. Also, I will be doing a store upload probably right before NCECA, and then when I get back from NCECA, I'll deliver everything. So everything's happening in March.
Yeah. March is a good month. I have no idea what the future holds because I'm applying to multiple state jobs, and I might be working at a new wine bar and cafe opening up in Sacramento.
Takes a while for the state jobs.
Mm-hmm. It does, which is why I'm doing the other job in the meantime. Hopefully, I got a second interview, so we'll see if I get the job.
I had a friend who applied, and it took him like 2 years.
Yeah, no, it's a long time. It's a long time. So, yeah, I mean, I guess I do have. I'm in the process of firing a bunch of the like extra mugs that I made that I was not able to get done in time for SAC Anime. So I'll probably do a bit of a shop update. Not quite sure when that's going to be, but keep an eye out. I can make no promises about social media. I can make no promises about the future. I can just hope that the reason things seem unsure and we cannot see our future is because it is so bright that it is blinding.
This timeline sucks. We're in the Firefly timeline.
Firefly? Does that mean we get to...
Learn Chinese, yes. Learn Mandarin, rather. Yes. Those are things Chinese, I guess, but yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess as long as I get to hang out with, the Firefly crew, that's pretty cool.
We're not main characters, Lindsey.
Yeah.
Everyone thinks they're a main character.
No.
Nope. Most of you not, to be honest. I'll be real with you.
Yeah. I'm like the person who has a perpetual, like, exclamation point over their head. Like, I don't know, I'm going to give you a quest or something. Or, no, I'm the mod. I'm the mod that's like... Okay, because there's a Skyrim mod that's called Interesting NPCs, and it like adds like in-depth conversations with like NPCs. That's me. I'm the NPC you can have a conversation with. Also, I have my own whole life and things that I'm doing. Okay, I'm done. Okay, all right, bye.
Bye. We're sorry if that was confusing.
And that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the Mud Peddlers. We would love to hear from you, so if you want to share your thoughts about the episodes or just see what Donte and I are working on in our studios, come say hi. You can find links to my social media at lindseymdillon.com. That's LINDSEY, M as in monster, DILLON.com.
And you can visit my pottery shop or see what I'm working on at earthnationceramics.com. And you can find me all over social media at Earth Nation Ceramics. It's spelled exactly how you think it's spelled.
And if you want to support the show, hear some bonus episodes, and see some behind the scenes of my work, you can support me and the show at patreon.com/Lindsey M Dillon. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time.